How the protests went down. On Sunday, July the 13th, only 5 days after the alleged sexual assault, the first large protest happened outside the Bell. At first, there were small groups of impromptu protesters, some against the hotel, the other the Refugees Welcome Brigade. It seems the latter had mostly come from the London borough of Waltham Forest. There were heated discussions, but no violence initially. Later, however, hundreds of locals descended on the vicinity, catching the authorities off guard. The leftists were escorted away by police. One of them got into a punch-up with a local, ending up bloodied. 2 hotel security guards alighting at the nearby bus stop were also allegedly attacked, perhaps mistaken for migrants, and again were photographed bleeding. While unacceptable, these alleged incidents do appear to have been the only violence on that day. The site has a reception area and restaurant on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, behind a tall fence, there are the accommodation blocks. The crowd came right up to the reception building and the fence, one man even climbing onto the roof to ring the bell, which no longer has a clapper. This protest, from the live stream I saw, did seem local and fairly spontaneous. The Homeland crew were not much in evidence, and as well as the expected stout Essex geezers, the crowd included many families, women and children. The atmosphere seemed more jovial than anything, the British wryly taking on the dark situation with humour, as we always have. On Thursday the 17th, there was rather more violence. Again, the protest was largely lawful, and it was still quite a local affair. Nevertheless, it was marred by the destructive scenes, and these of course received the greatest attention. There did seem to be some tourists and so-called influencers who came down, especially once word got round that things had kicked off. Some may have been agitators of some description. I'm aware these are also allegations that were levelled at the July riots, in spite of much evidence to the contrary. The possibility shouldn't be overlooked, but broadly the events of that day do appear to have been a case of angered local people losing their cool. This was not entirely their fault. Police decided to escort the leftist counter-protesters from the tube station to the hotel. Stand Up to Racism had organised these. The choice was made despite the trouble caused by the 2 groups mixing on Sunday. It appears they were led along Station Road and the High Road, rather than around the back streets to Bell Common. Before they even made it to the hotel, the obvious occurred and the leftists were quickly pulled back. Many of the hotel protesters followed them, attempting to run them out of town, some trying to physically assault them. At this point, there were a few leftists wearing face coverings, one of whom made a gun gesture at the locals. These were described by some as Antifa, which is an active group, but did not seem much in evidence here. Look at it from the locals' point of view. You have turned up to protest an alleged sexual assault on a schoolgirl by someone who arguably shouldn't have been in the country or at large. Then along come a load of cranky outsiders defending the group the accused was part of. Not only that, but they are calling you fascists and Nazis and pushing for more potential abusers to be brought in. You are not going to be best pleased, and hostility is likely to occur. The police at first cordoned the leftists near the junction of Tower Road and the High Road, ironically next to one of the affected schools. This turned increasingly hairy as the crowd surrounded them. It was largely verbal, with some missiles thrown and a bit of shoving. The police adjusted the cordon so that the protesters were sheltered in Tower Road. Unfortunately, that street can be accessed from the rear, and some locals headed around there. There was no exit for the police. It was at this point that tension spilled over into violence. This is all on various live streams. AY Audits and Wesley Winter captured it best. Youths with improvised face coverings, shirts, flags and hoods started to target police vans as the vehicles tried to navigate through the throng. They tore off wing mirrors, kicked at panels and jumped on the roofs. The vans retreated further down the street, with back doors hanging open. People in the crowds jostled more with the police. The police would later report 8 officers had been assaulted throughout the evening, receiving minor injuries. Further along the high road, near Tesco, protesters had put minor obstacles in the street. 4 police vans, possibly the ones just attacked, drove at speed in an easterly direction over to the station or council offices. They hurtled towards the crowd, which was admittedly close to the vehicles. The first knocked down a plastic roadworks barrier. When the second van approached, a protester seemed to slip on the barrier and was struck, briefly carried along by the bonnet of the van. Luckily, he did not fall under the wheels and was bounced to the side, largely unscathed. A cameraman filming the incident had to dive out of the way and received nasty cuts from the fall. His colleague had to drag him from the road as the last 2 vans approached. This incident appeared reckless on the part of the police, to say the least, and should be investigated. It certainly helped anger the protesters, as word of the collision spread. Anger that already existed because of how the police had escorted the leftists in. Some were claiming it was attempted murder, and the outrage would fuel the unrest for 3 more hours. The police then decided the leftists would have to be evacuated from Tower Road. Police vans were brought in and filled with the counter-protesters, ferrying them to the tube station. The anti-hotel protesters then either went home or headed back to the Bell. Police had racked out the riot gear and now appeared ready for the streets of Belfast. A man confronting police was struck in the face with a riot shield, knocking out his dental implants. Again, a questionable use of force, no matter how objectionable the man was being. Another chap, it appeared, was shoved roughly by a policeman after the copper was struck by something and he mistakenly thought the bystander was to blame. Police vans continued to be attacked, with one parked outside and others driving into the hotel car park. A dispersal order was put into effect, meaning the police could arrest anyone remaining after 10:30 p.m. Most chose to leave, although quite a few stayed to the bitter end. With darkness having fallen in the forest, some were streaming the eerie scene as 0 hour drew near. Like something out of Apocalypse Now, a man delivered a slow monologue to a silent row of cops about how they were betraying their own people. One streamer keenly hurled abuse at officers as they lined up ready to clear the area. Eventually the police charged, running down the street with batons raised. The streamer's camera was knocked to the floor in the style of the Blair Witch Project, and we heard him protesting as he was arrested off screen.